Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for another Alpha News live stream. This morning, we're very fortunate to be joined in studio by Tim Miller of the new House Republican Caucus over in the state legislature. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. I really appreciate being here today.
Yeah, of course, of course. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. A note to our viewers before we really begin in earnest. If you have questions, please drop them in the comment sections. I see those and we ask them. But it seems like the main thing we should be talking about right now is the special session. So as I'm sure many of you guys know in the audience, Governor Walz is sort of holding the special session hostage to a list of demands. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so first of all, Tim Miller. I live in Princeburg, Minnesota. I serve District 17A. This is my 4th term. And I really appreciate you giving me this time. So there's been a lot of talk about special session, really for the last several months. And it was all emanated out of a committee that was formed, House and Senate committee, on how to spend $250 million for frontline essential heroes.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And I kind of knew where that was going to go. And I will tell you that I've sort of laughed and cried at the same time, but I said the only way we're going to spend $250 million is to really spend $500 million or $1 billion.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be differences of opinion. And viewers, you need to know, this is, when we say we're sending this to frontline essential workers, you'll have a mental list. Some of you might have different lists of who that is, but make no mistake, a lot of this money is going to political supporters. And so both sides can't come up with what this number is going to be. And I've heard some things. So over the summer, we're close, we're not close. I don't think we've ever been close to a special session.
Okay.
Well, just the last couple days, there was a letter that surfaced that was signed by Governor Walz and Speaker of the House, Melissa Hortman, and they had a nice blank spot for now Majority Leader Jeremy Miller to sign on the terms for special session. Mm-hmm. So the governor can convene a special session, the House can adjourn, and they're typically short, so you have to have some suspension of rules, which requires minority votes, all this stuff. So what ends up happening is they come to these terms of agreement before a special session. And I want to be clear, there's nothing special about special session. Because to come to an agreement, there's all sorts of deals that are made that are less than holy deals.
Right.
And
are those legally binding, the deals? Like if you get into special session and immediately start breaking the deals, can the governor call it off? Can people get sued?
No, there's no legal bind in the sense of that. However, when leadership, we can get into this discussion about the dynamics of leadership and rank and file in the legislature, but when leadership comes to an agreement, the caucuses are going to follow suit. There is a price to pay down the road if you turn back on that. Now, individuals can step out, but to battle against this stuff, it takes quite a few votes. You probably typically don't have enough.
Yeah.
So this letter came out and gave a list of terms that the governor said, I will have special session under these terms. That's not new. That happens all the time.
Okay.
It isn't necessarily, that doesn't necessarily go public, but that is typically the case. And you have the leaders from the House and Senate, agree to these terms, and then they move forward from there.
Are people disturbed by that? Like just sort of rank and file legislators?
Yeah, and I would say that's because big government is less desired by Republicans. We like it less.
Right.
But there are Democrats that speak out and have a problem with this. Lyndon Carlson, who retired last term, was the biggest one that I actually took his phrase, there's nothing special about special session. It's a problem.
Yeah.
And the dynamics are a problem. And that means that when I go in that letter, they said, no amendments. Well, you're a legislator, you can always provide an amendment, but that really means that procedurally it's going to die.
Right.
You really have no amendments coming forward. What was different about this time was there was a letter that was signed by the governor, signed by the House Speaker, and apparently it looks that it was just delivered to the Senate and said, like it or lump it. These agreements are usually a negotiation that happen in the room. Don't really like that, but that's what we have. In this case, it appears that the Democrats basically said, here's what we're going to do, no matter what, you sign it or else.
Right.
And I don't understand why, because that list is not compelling for any Republican legislator.
Right.
The closest, because we have a dominance of Republican legislators Greater Minnesota. I'm from a very deep rural Minnesota. We have agriculture, and we've had some drought areas, pretty severe drought areas in some places. The good news is it's not in all places, but there's drought relief for farmers in there. I think that was kind of their hook. The problem is I don't think the state of Minnesota is presenting anything that agriculture truly wants. So I don't know that that's a sales point anyway.
Yeah.
I have talked with a couple senators, and I won't say names because they're not here to defend their own position. But it's my understanding that there's very little interest in the House, or pardon me, in the Senate Republicans to even have a special session. We're getting close enough to session. So I think it's important for people to understand that I don't believe we're going to have special session. I know the senators that I talk to, they're far apart on agreement of what's going to happen, and that's encouraging to me. As a conservative, I don't think we need to have this special session. I don't think we need to be spending all this money anyway. This is the taxpayers' dollars, or the Treasury's printed dollars, however you want to look at it. And this is just not something that we need to do at this time. And certainly, if there is that discussion, we have session coming up, we can go through the proper rules of the House, proper rules of the Senate, and we can get that done, at least with a little more transparency to the person back home. Special sessions by nature, and by this letter as an example, is not transparent at all.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things I understand Republicans would like to accomplish in a special session is deposing Health Commissioner Jen Malcolm. How high is that sort of on the Republican and the new House Republican agenda? Is that something that needs to happen, or is it just sort of a political point?
It's a fair question, and I think we would like to see that happen, or her straighten up with how she's doing some things. And the Senate has threatened that. I'm not in the Senate, so I don't know the level or degree that they're serious on that. I think they're actually pretty serious.
Okay.
And that's, I think, one of the concerns by Governor Walz is that if we have special session, what is the Senate going to do with that? At the very least, it's certainly a leverage point. That if we're going to have special session, Governor, this is what you're going to have at risk.
Right.
I think that's another reason why they're not going to come to an agreement on something like that. Senator Miller is not going to say, well, that's off the table. No matter what, we aren't going to discuss it, which is what the governor wants.
Right.
So he's not going to call special session.
Yeah. No, this does make sense. It's not a total defeat because Republicans don't really want to spend the hundreds of millions of dollars anyway. So if they don't get the session, the money doesn't get spent, and that's somewhat of a victory.
That's definitely a victory. And the word that I'm getting now, federal government in this last infrastructure bill, which I found out from Congresswoman Michelle Fishbach's office just yesterday, that infrastructure bill is about 10% infrastructure, and the rest is just large. Whether you agree or disagree with the infrastructure part, just understand that it's mostly not that.
Yeah, there's provisions in there to put AI tracking in cars. Literally, it's insane.
Yeah, there's all sorts of crazy stuff in it. But in part of it, I have heard numbers, a wide range of numbers, but Minnesota, I think the lowest number I heard, Minnesota is expected to get another chunk of money of $5 to $6 billion. And understand that that's largely the dynamics of even second year session. That's largely at the discretion and empowered by the governor. I mean, he doesn't have control of the money per se, but in special session, I don't think we're going to see this money if we have a special session. So we're going to be clear. But those are the sort of dollar amounts that we're looking at. If we're going to be having any of these dollar amounts put upon us, the public better know exactly how much it is, what we plan to do with it, and does the public agree with what the government plans to spend it on?
Well, novel concept, government transparency and then democracy and how we spend money. It's not something you see very often.
And Kyle, this is a frustration, I'm sure, to many of your viewers, okay? But it's certainly a frustration of mine.
Yeah.
And I've, even if you will, to my own detriment at times, I've really pushed for the transparency of the public. I communicate to my constituents what's going on, whether they agree with me or not. I have people that dissent with me, but as long as if they show me respect, we're going to have that conversation. I think we need to learn to disagree at a respectful level, but be honest about this stuff. Government at the state and federal level, if people listening are worried about the transparency of government now, you don't have half the story. It's bad, okay? And not everything is a deal in back rooms per se, but there's a lot that goes on in our agencies, sometimes in deal making in the legislature, largely in the agencies and the governor's office, that is just not forthright with the public. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why the public doesn't trust government. I think it's valid that they don't trust government. I think it's valid when people come to me and they question my veracity. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me because I like to think that I'm an honest guy, right. But it's valid and it's palpable. Mm-hmm. And I think that government needs to build the citizens' trust again. Last year when the things happened in Washington, D.C., and they put the fencing up, and in St. Paul they put the fencing up, and I know that Speaker Hooten had written a letter a month or so ago about what we're going to do. We're going to pretty much keep the state office building shut down, in part because of security concerns. Listen, I want to be safe. I want to make sure, but by the way, the state troopers do an excellent job, as does the Sergeant at Arms office. But if our government, elected officials, are feeling threatened by the public, I think it's our responsibility to say, what are we doing? Yeah. What are we doing wrong? What can we do better? We have a responsibility in this. This is not just, the public doesn't understand. If they only knew how great Tim Miller was, they'd be okay with it. Yeah. I need to look at myself, and I need to say, what is it that we need to do differently? Not enough people in government are doing that right now. They're just saying, well, the public is against us, so we need to defend ourselves. This is not a healthy dynamic.
Mm. It's very insightful that you say that, because even at the national level, the conversation seems to be these elite, enlightened legislators versus the filthy, unwashed masses that want to go to protests and wave flags and talk about how they don't like the government. And very few people, especially in government, give those guys a sympathetic reading, even though we purport to have a democracy. It's very sad.
Yeah, and it's a dynamic, and historically you've seen this, maybe in different ways, but you think of the countries of old, Great Britain and stuff like that with the kings, as the people started becoming as unrest was starting to show, they pulled within. It's true. And they acted out against the people. We need to rebuild the trust of government to the people. Mm-hmm. And there's by nature a lack of trust in government. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. But we're at a definitely unhealthy level. I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that. Right. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. Before we started, you had mentioned with the Kyle Rittenhouse, said I wouldn't bring it up, so I bring it up. But with a potential verdict today, that there's concern about unrest. Oh, yeah. Okay? Oh, yeah. And when I say unrest, that's the kind term.
Yeah, no, it's buildings burning, people dying is possible.
Right. We are not at a good place in history to where things like that are potential, and we're actually organizing around that potential outcome.
Yeah, it's a good point. Do you sense in the state legislature that there's anybody who holds these same beliefs? Is there anybody that looks sympathetically on disenfranchised, unhappy Minnesotans?
Yes, you do. And ironically, this is where I get myself in trouble. Okay. But ironically, it's on both sides of the aisle. There are some of the most liberal, radical people that I don't agree with their politics. Yeah. But they agree with the fundamental point that government needs to have integrity, it needs to be more transparent, needs to answer less to the power brokers and more to the people. Yeah. But on the Republican side, there are several of us. You mentioned the new House Republican caucus. I think that we have one primary reason why we formed, and I know you wanted to get into that discussion. I'm perfectly happy to do that. But I think the sentiment from all four of us, you will find, are that we need to get back to operating government the way the people and the way the Constitution intended it to, and it's a priority for us.
What operable steps do you think can be taken right now in Minnesota to get back to an actual government of the people? I know it's a tough question. With how corrupt things have become, maybe there is nothing we can do tomorrow. I guess that's a solution also.
Well, no, I do have one answer. This is we're in limited time here, so I think this could be like a long show just on this question. But I do think the one thing in the last year that has really risen to the surface is we're a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I don't know that it's for the people right now. Right. But it can be of the people. And I think what you're seeing that's good is, and it may not always be articulated at the best, or it may be acted upon not the best.
Mhm.
But we have citizens becoming re-engaged with their government in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. There's been an apathy there before this.
Yeah.
So my challenge would be is one thing that we can do, when people come to me and they say, and I'm going to kind of put it in sort of sarcastic terms to make my point. They come to me, a person who works in government, and says, how can you make government stop harming me? Well, I am government. I don't like to think I don't harm people, but do you get my point when I say that? The people need to hold us accountable. The people need to ask questions. That doesn't mean lash out. That doesn't mean get all worked up and just lob bombs at us. That's some of the ways that probably aren't helpful. But be willing to have a conversation. Come to me, Representative Miller. I'm not happy that you are. Can you explain to me why?
Yeah.
Now, what's responsible for me is to be willing to have that respectful conversation, right? That's a challenge right now because not a lot of legislators are willing to do that at this time. It's the people, and they just need to understand they're doing the best that they can. They elected me. Don't talk to me. That we shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
So I think the best first step we can is for people to continue to be engaged. Now, here's the challenge that I put for people. Because of the distrust, because of the acrimony, because of the tensions, we tend to be firing shots, and it's understandable, totally understandable. But I believe in the U.S. Constitution. I think it was the most beautiful document. I think it was inspired by God. Mm-hmm. We need to embrace the Constitution. Your government is not acting constitutionally, but we need to demand that government behaves according to the Constitution. But we do too. Okay? Yeah. I still believe that we have a system that works. I don't think that some people feel that it's gone. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with that. I think that if we adhere to the principles of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and our other founding documents, I think that we can get back on the road to a better country.
For sure. But that was an excellent set of exchanges. I agree with a lot of what you have to say there. To make it more specific for a moment, COVID, that's something where a lot of people feel the state has lacked transparency. We recently had a gentleman on, Kevin Roche, of the Healthy Skeptic, and he's been filing these data practices requests, which is basically state-level FOIAs, and the state has been totally unwilling to work with them. They've been stonewalling him. They haven't been giving him the data that he wants. What's your thoughts on how the state has been with regards to transparency in coronavirus?
The state has largely lied to people, has twisted the truth, has manipulated things. And I say, let's be calm and let's be reasonable. Yeah. But we've gotten to that point. I don't trust what comes out. Now, there might be some valid information, but when you don't trust all of the information, what do you trust and what do you not trust?
Why do you think it's not trustworthy? Are they manipulating data? Are they fabricating data? I mean, what's going on that makes it so we can't trust them?
So I'm a people watcher. I watch systems. I kind of study, and I can't always put my finger on what's wrong, but I can tell you when something doesn't add up.
Right.
And I think the people in Minnesota agree there are things that just don't add up with the behaviors of government. Yeah. So, for example, we go back to the legislature was announced over a month ago. The next session, which doesn't start until February, the Speaker of the House said, we're going to have no one in the state office building. The Capitol is going to be closed to everyone. And if you're in the House chamber, you have to wear masks. Mm-hmm. Okay? This is almost 3 months before we're in session.
Yeah.
That she's making this declarative statement. She's saying it's based on the health and safety of people.
Yeah.
We could go deep into the weeds on what exactly is safe and what is healthy for people. But let's go to their own dogma, if you will. Everyone get vaccinated. Do you want to go back to a society where we're around each other? Everyone get vaccinated. Well, people are vaccinated. Why can't I'm not saying I agree with this. Understand, okay? I'm just saying that this is what they put forward. If they're believing that the vaccine is, they're throwing it into the grade schools and all this stuff, then why is our own government not behaving consistent with that? Right. Why is the same person who said that night was at a fundraiser with everyone this close, smiling, laughing, doing selfies and all of that stuff? And then when you ask these questions, now I'm not saying I ask this to Melissa Hortman, so I want to be clear, but if you ask this question to someone like Melissa Hortman, they're like, shut up and listen to the CDC. You don't take this seriously. You think this disease is a fake.
Right.
That's where they go.
Yeah. Yeah. If you ask any question, they don't ever give you an answer. They just respond by discrediting you as a human being.
Yes, exactly. And so why should I trust? You know, I have a story, a constituent, and this is the sort of thing we deal with very often. She's an RN, works for a provider, and she's pregnant. Now she already had COVID a couple months ago, but they're mandating that she gets the vaccine. She doesn't want to get the vaccine because of her pregnancy. Which, by the way, the science isn't there yet, but the results have shown is that there does seem to be some level of increase of miscarriages from the vaccine.
Yeah.
Now, again, science needs to prove safe, efficacy, all that sort of stuff. But she has a valid concern.
Yeah.
So she wanted to get a medical reason for not getting the vaccine. She's pregnant. And they said that can only be given if your doctor writes a letter. Well, no doctor's going to write the letter because they have a liability involved if they write a letter.
Right.
Okay? So
we've been seeing stories too where a lot of doctors are being directly told not to write the letters, despite what they might believe personally.
I believe that.
Yeah.
And so so either you know, if you have the disease, if you have the virus, does it make you immune to it? Now, by the way, say yes or no. But you know what the answer is? You alluded to it.
Yeah.
They don't answer you.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so why should people trust this system?
Right.
And I had a meeting with one of my local hospitals a week or so ago, and I love these people because they talk very candidly and very openly about things. I don't feel like I'm being lobbied. I don't feel like we're getting the official position or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I've asked about some of this stuff, and they said they're like frankly we have to do what we're told to do. Mm-hmm. You know, we have to go down this thing, and we're not totally supportive of it. This is the way it's going to be. This is what, even though they're facing nursing shortages.
Yeah.
Even though they're facing, you know, I think I saw a headline. I think it was in the Star Tribune, I believe. That was like, Minnesota has no hospital beds. Folks, everyone I've talked to, it's not because of all the COVID cases. It's because we don't have workers, so they're having to shut down beds. Yeah. So let's have that conversation. We're not allowed to have that conversation. Right? Because then you suddenly, you're one of those. Yep. You don't believe anything that's out there, you know, and why can't you just accept that this disease is real? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and I think that pretty succinctly expresses the frustration a lot of our viewers have, and that, you know, people in the media have when we try to ask basic questions and we just get a non-answer for months on end. It's terrible. To leapfrog now from one hot button issue to another, I like doing this. We were talking before we went live a little bit about abortion. This is an issue that's the pro-life cause is very near and dear to your heart. And there's some stuff happening at the federal level that could impact us here in Minnesota. I don't think a lot of people know about this. Explain it for us.
Yeah. So Kyle, you opened the door. So I'll be brief and succinct. So a couple things to know most specifically. First of all, there's the Mississippi Supreme Court case. It's Dobbs versus some abortion center. I should memorize the name of it because it's going to become a historical name as big as Roe v. Wade. It's being heard at the Supreme Court on December 1st. The decision will be handed down. Typically, it will probably be about June. But experts are agreeing that on the shape of the court and the things that the court has said in the past about this issue, this is lining up to be a decision that is really going to affect Roe v. Wade. We don't know exactly how, but we believe it's either going to give certain controls back to the states or completely overturn Roe v. Wade, which doesn't legalize or make illegal abortion. It basically empowers the states. Mm-hmm. So that's what brings it back to Minnesota. Now, the thing that the viewers need to understand about Minnesota is that we are a pretty pro-abortion state in our practices. Mm-hmm. I don't think the citizens are, but we are in our practices. And the behaviors of the legislature, especially on the Democrat side, is very consistent with that. Yeah. Us Republicans have tried to fight for life. But here's what's happening. If Roe v. Wade, let's just say it's overturned, which is a big if, but let's say if. Mm-hmm. The states are lining up that traditionally pro-life states are either passing laws or getting in line to pass laws that are going to go in that direction. The pro-abortion states are going to go in the other direction. Right. Well, on the map, the Dakotas, Iowa, Wisconsin, probably Nebraska, well, certainly Nebraska, but probably Wisconsin And all these areas are going to be, if you will, pro-life states. Okay, to what degree, we'll see, but they're going to be pro-life states. Minnesota is looking to be one of the destination locations for abortion.
Yeah.
So they're already
That's
doing.
a good way to put it, abortion destination.
And that's what they're doing. So there's a couple things that are happening that have not made the news. The biggest one is there's a group called Gender Justice et al. There's some other groups, but Gender Justice filed a lawsuit about 6 to 9 months before COVID broke out. A lawsuit to get rid of all restrictions in Minnesota for abortion through live birth. And to, if you will, we have a Doe v. Gomez here in Minnesota. It's a state Supreme Court case which makes abortion an essential health care item. Okay, there's a whole other discussion there. Yeah. But they're looking to strengthen that here in Minnesota. And I will tell you...
These are the same people that are also lobbying to try to get rid of state funding of adoption services, right?
Yes, another whole episode. Kyle, you and I may just have to do a weekly show on that. But anyway, so that is occurring, and we believe that the state Supreme Court, we have the Supreme Court Chief Justice, Lori Gilday, is fantastic. Okay, we have two very conservative, Barry Anderson, very conservative, but the rest of the court is very liberal. Okay. So we believe that it's going to take about 4 to 6 years to get to the state Supreme Court. We believe they're probably going to support this. I mean, prayers, please, but that's where we go. The other thing that's happening in Minnesota, we're one of the states where we can have essentially mail order chemical abortions. They're happening in Minnesota. There's an organization called Just the Pill, and they are an organization that is providing chemical abortions to people through just talking to a doctor on their phone and then getting this. By the way, we don't know if that person's taking it or someone else is. There's all sorts of...
Doesn't that intersect in a really destructive way with Minnesota's sex trafficking problem?
Yes.
I mean, that just seems like it's enabling these people who run these illicit brothels.
100% agree with you, Cal. So they also have a van. They have a vehicle that's going around. And by the way, they're targeting western Minnesota by me because of the Dakotas are essentially abortion-free right now. Right. They're targeting out there with these chemical abortions. And they are advancing this. And I am sure that the legislature probably gave them money through things in this legislature. Can't prove it yet, but I'm sure. So the tide is definitely going in that direction. I am one of many people, okay, but I am on the front lines with this. This is why I know these things, is that we have to combat this. We can have an argument about where you stand on abortion. I am, from conception forward, no abortions, and I will defend that, and I'll give you a long summary of reasons. We won't do that right now, okay? But regardless of where you're at on this, I don't think anyone in Minnesota believes unrestricted abortions through live birth is a place that we want to go. And understand, here in Minnesota, that is the direction we're going right now, and we need to intersect that and get it going in the other direction.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. We appreciate the update on that. Now to leapfrog to a third topic. You're, of course, a member of the new House Republican Caucus, which was formed, from what I understand, in response to some problems you guys had with the leadership of the sort of mainstream Republican Caucus in Minnesota. One thing that I've wondered for a long time, so I'm glad you're here, is what's the end goal? Would you guys like to keep recruiting new members and become a force that rivals the mainstream caucus? Or at some point, would you be willing to rejoin the mainstream?
Kyle, that's a great question because I've had everyone from a legislator from the other caucus to individuals in my district and everywhere in between. What is your end goal?
Right. What happens next?
Right. And there's lots of presumptions as to what the end goal are. So I appreciate the time to give this. And I want to be clear that the four of us in the caucus, we're pretty unified on this, but we would give our different take and probably emphasize some things. So I want to be clear, this is me speaking on behalf, but no one in the caucus would have a problem with this answer that I'm about to give.
Sure.
Our goal is to have a unified, strong Republican Party in the state of Minnesota. That is our end goal. And I know that some people came to me and said, well, then why did you break away? Well, I think it's important to understand that I view us more as being in exile as opposed to forming a new country.
Sure.
Okay? Kyle, you mentioned that this had to do with some leadership questions. Right. People have said, well, I know you don't get along with the leader. I know that you have some concerns or something like that. That's a watered down version. I took very seriously this dramatic step that I took. It was dramatic. It was potentially harmful to my political status, which I don't think is ever a priority, by the way, anyway. So that wasn't difficult. But I know that I had to look at the dynamics of the legislature and say, how does this affect the people that elected me? Because that's who I answer to.
Yeah.
My problem.
Novel concept, right?
Novel concept. So again, people are kind of like, well, wouldn't that explain why you stay in there? The dynamics that we addressed earlier in government, we have such a centralized power structure in the legislature now that $52 billion plus budget that we formed, a little bit oversimplified but accurate, okay, was really decided on by a small handful of people.
Yeah.
The rank and file legislators, your legislator had less of an impact and less of a voice than you probably would want them to have. The dynamics are bad. The structures within the current caucus Republican caucus is very centralized.
Yeah.
Worse than that, where it's centralized is on people that I think that have huge ethics problems and corruption problems. So, and we'll let them have their day if they want, okay? But if I'm faced with that, and people hired me in a large part because, Tim, we think that you have integrity, Tim, we think that you have the morals necessary, the ethics necessary, that puts me in a very difficult position. So I believed I had no other choice but to step out and then work the best we could to march back towards having a healthy Republican Party in the state of Minnesota. Listen, I am very conservative, as they say. I very much rank on the right. There's some people to the right of me, but I'm very far right.
Yeah.
There are people in the House of Representatives that are much more moderate. They're to the left of me that are Republican.
Right.
I support them as well, which, by the way, Republicans listening, we need to figure out a way to do that.
Right.
We need to stop firing shots at each other. Okay? We can disagree on certain things. But in contrast, we're the Democrats, especially in Minnesota, where they're so far left, okay? I think we all can agree on that. We need to navigate our way into doing that, but we need to do it forthrightly, honestly, that, again, we get back to the trust of the people. That's what we need to do. And so I took this dramatic step to join this caucus because I believe that I could better serve those principles and those ideals for the people that I represent. Our goal is to hopefully move forward, and we've been very clear with people. Our goal is that with different leadership, we plan to reunify as a one Republican caucus in the state of Minnesota.
So it's very interesting. Yeah, because a lot of people interpret it as like the New House Republican Caucus is some breakaway group that wants to move even further right. The way you present it is different. It's, we want to stick to our sort of anti-corruption, classic conservative principles. Everyone else isn't doing that, so we're going to, sort of put the stake down here, adhere to our values, and then hopefully someday we can all recoagulate, back under those values.
Well said. And by the way, there are people that want us to become that caucus that moves to the far right and puts our stake in the ground.
It'd be interesting. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and I think of like a lot of people, we formed not too long after the Freedom Caucus was really big in D.C. So everyone thought, okay, we're the Freedom Caucus, right? No. And by the way, we had those discussions. One of the funny things that you'll see is if you really want to be nerdy and look at voting records of the four of us, it's pretty rare that the four of us vote the same.
Really?
Now, you will see us vote the same, but then you have to look at the broader Republican caucus, and you'll see all the Republicans voting on those things.
Right.
But if it's a vote where you see people going different directions, ironically, there's been times where we've had three different votes. I've got three. We've had some vote red, some vote green, and some not vote. Out of four of us.
Yeah.
So we have a high level of respect for each other, but we respect the independence of our own decisions.
Of course.
We do think there's times that we need to coalesce around something.
Yeah.
With four people in a legislature of 134, that doesn't necessarily move the needle much.
Yeah.
But there are things that are important enough where we say this is a caucus position, the four of us are going to do this. But I will tell you, the lesson that we have learned by just the four of us, maybe just out of sheer necessity of having to go on our own, it causes us to read the bills closer. It causes us to question things a little bit more that's going through there. It gives us the independence. I don't have a person. This is one of the dynamics that's difficult. I don't have a person saying, well, Miller, you have to vote this way.
Right.
Or these three reasons. The world's going to implode. You're going to, whatever. The legislature is very good at manipulating you into voting somewhat different than your district, your conscience.
Yeah.
It happens, not all the time, but it does happen. I sink or swim, folks, on my votes, and if my constituency doesn't like it, they vote me out of office. I think that's what people want.
Yeah, this is something not very many figures talk about, is the pressure that legislators face from other legislators and how this sort of rank system works inside St. Paul. Everyone knows that, you guys have to campaign to beat your opponents and to win the election, but not very many people know about what happens after that and these sort of dynamics. So I'm glad you can illuminate them for us.
Yeah, and it's a lot to do with the lobbies. It's not all legislators. So when I was first elected back in 2014, good friend of mine, Senator Dave Thompson, very good friend. And he came to me and he said something that I've held near and dear. He said, Tim, you're going to find that the one power you have at all times in the legislature is your vote. And it may not seem like a lot, but it's the most powerful thing that you have is your vote. And what people are going to do, whether it's lobbyists, it's other legislators, it's the administration, constituents, whoever, they're going to try and take that power away and manipulate you into voting different than what you think that you should vote.
Yeah.
I also had another good friend of mine, a Democrat, by the way, Hooten, who actually ran against me a couple of years ago. He taught me another important lesson. He said, always decide things in your conscience first, your constituents second, and your caucus third. And I would put then lobbyists like a distant fourth or whomever else.
Yeah.
But there is a role for lobbyists. There is. Don't have time to go into that, but there is a role. Not everyone agrees with me on that, but I do see an importance in certain things. But we can't invert that relationship.
Right.
And one of the problems getting back to the new House Republican caucus is I felt that the caucus was overpowering my conscience and my constituents.
Yeah.
And I had a very serious decision to make, and this is the decision that I made.
For sure. Circling back to this lobbyist thing, I've always wanted to ask somebody, how much influence do state level lobbyists actually have? Because I have this perception that they're less funded, a little less slick than the national lobbies, but I might be wrong there.
Well, it's less, but it can still be palpable. So, very briefly, let me explain. There are lobbyists, they do help you because they're experts in an area. So like I was doing things in public safety last year that I was very comfortable talking to the Sheriff's Association or the Police Chiefs Association. I had questions because they could give me perspective, and they definitely have their motivations, but you know that. But these are people that I can respect, okay? You have other lobbyists that I don't trust as much. So there is a role that they're helpful. Where the dynamic changes is there's pressure in politics to raise money. And to raise money, the rules are such that either lobbyists can provide more money or they can direct you to more money. And there's a pressure to do that. And what you will see at times is, frankly, what you do is you see at times is you will see someone say, well, I want this much money, but guess what? We need to have this key thing done.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that? Because, by the way, if you have a key thing and the other side finds out that you have a key thing, well, they're going to want their key thing at the table, right?
Exactly.
I think that's going to happen no matter what, and I don't like it, but I'm willing to accept. I'm not accepting it, but I know it's going to be. I'm a big boy. I know it's going to be. I mean, now is the reality of that.
Yeah.
What we have now is we have those things that are overpowering and dominating the budget. So they are overpowering and dominating the work that we have. On public safety, I went on a rant on the House floor on how both sides got what they wanted, just go to the other side for talking points.
Yeah.
When in the end, we have some issues we need to discuss. But I brought up one very fair subject that I think the viewers would say it was mandatory binding arbitration. It's a nerdy thing that we have to deal with. Sure. I won't go into it now. But I think it needs to be discussed. Public unions hate that it gets brought up. So I actually had a lobbyist that is actually really probably on my side on the issue, but they're also on the side of public unions.
Right.
So when I brought this up, a lobbyist chews me out on the phone saying, Representative Miller, you threw every cop in the state of Minnesota under the bus. I'm very pro-police officers, very pro-law enforcement.
Right.
But because I brought up one topic that I think is, by the way, a nonpartisan issue to be discussed, but it gets into the dynamics of partisanship.
Right.
They blew it up. We can't have that conversation. Guess what happens? Public safety is still a top issue in Minnesota. People don't feel safe in the state of Minnesota because of it, because we're not willing to have the real conversation.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground today. We've talked abortion, we've talked COVID, we've talked transparency. I really like your thoughts on the role of government and how it should relate to the people. If there's one thing that I haven't asked you or that you want to leave the viewers with, what would that be?
Well, Kyle, I appreciate this time, and in case anyone can now tell, I like to talk and I get passionate about these things. The thing that I want to leave people with, and this is very difficult, we need to figure out a way to build trust and integrity with each other. We need to figure out a way to heal us as a country. Now, there's a lot of people that don't want that to happen because they're empowered by it. But I'm telling you that the more that we fight amongst ourselves, the more these people that we don't like are empowered. It's a dynamic that may or may not make sense to you. I find that talking to people, even people that I disagree with, even people that I don't trust, breaks down a lot of barriers. One small example of that is State Representative Cedric Frazier is a freshman representative, and he's a fireballer coming out. He's very liberal, and he pretty much fit all the pieces that you would expect from someone. He's very intelligent. He's an attorney. Now, I respect that because when I was first elected, I was a fireballer on the other side, okay? And there's some things that I even said that I'd like to take back. But I won't tell the whole story as to how, but we stumbled upon each other and were sort of forced to talk to each other at first. But then we ended up having breakfast with each other. Mm-hmm. Representative Frazier and I don't agree on probably anything on the issues. Politically, we take a different tact on how we think things should be changed. So we don't even agree there. Mm-hmm. But by the time we were done having breakfast, we had a level of trust with each other. Mm-hmm. And guess what? We had a level of trust with each other, and we looked at the people that we don't trust, and we, in unison, said, what can we do to either, if you will, convert those people to our ways, or how can we get those people out of office? Sure. I really encourage people. I know this sounds simple, and it may sound trite, and the last thing you want to do, but we need to start talking to each other again.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you talking to us, and we appreciate the viewers for listening. Representative